Isrem, Saisark, Oviknacht. I admit that sometimes, for some reason, it does feel like it's too late in the morning to remember what happened this day. When I was in high school years, my father would sometimes worry that I'd be late in school, would knock on my door and say, "Son, it's too late." I was wondering, how can it be so late or too late if the day has not even started? We live in an interesting world. The world where sounds are put together into words, and the words sometimes make sense, but sometimes they simply refuse to do so. Some words sound similar, yet they would give no idea of what they mean. The other words would have a similar sound, and it would be easier to figure out the meaning. For example, in Romanian, the word apricot, what would that be? In Russian, there is a word abrikos. It turns out both words mean a juicy fruit, and it's easy to make out the sense of it. But the other words, they sound similar, but sometimes would have an opposite meaning, or might be even offensive to somebody. Living in a country where people were some from the Russian heritage, some from Romanian or Moldavian, was quite puzzling for a 6-year-old, 7-year-old, and later on, 10-year-old. During my first attempts to understand what's going on, I had a theory that the meaning of the words might be connected to the sounds. Today it's called phonemic connection. It was easy to get in translation, but of course I was not the only one, and half of the Moldavian population were partly from Russian or Moldavian mixed families. I lived on the second floor of a 150-year-old building, and our neighbor was my friend. He was my age, and his father was a young PhD student at university. Later, he became a professor of linguistics, specializing in English and French. But at that time, he volunteered to teach kids in the nearby school where myself and my friend went. And after the first lesson, he asked his students, the kids, if we have any questions. For some reason, there was a boggling question in my head. I asked him, is it possible to translate thoughts into different language? And it seemed like a pretty clear idea for me, but I didn't have enough words to express it. And Uncle Dmitry had no answer. And I was happy somewhat, in a way, because I asked an adult a question and he was puzzled. He had no answer. Today it would be easier to understand what the idea was with all the large language models. Or what is a large language model? Who have seen a large language? Well, I would call it long tongue model. Language comes from Latin lingua, and it was clear to me because I've heard this word in Moldavian speaking families lingua means tongue. So large language might better be translated to long tongue model, the LTM. I grew up in Moldova, a country with a very rich history, which originated, or at some point was a part of the Roman Empire. And at the same time, after the Second World War, the Bessarabia became a part of the Soviet Union. Good morning, fellow Toastmasters. If traveling in time, as we've seen it back in the future, would be possible, and you found yourself in front of the Roman Caesar, which words would you use? Having only Moldavian Russian dictionary.